So where are you from, originally?
From around here, you know.
Valley?
Martin Scorsese in New York. Wong Kar-Wai in Hong Kong. Federico Fellini in Rome.
Canoga, Reseda.
No, you know what Torrance is?
Sometimes directors become synonymous with specific cities, not just because that's where they set many of their movies, but because of the love they so clearly have for the place.
You must travel quite a lot.
Oh, no, I don't travel.
You could argue that Paul Thomas Anderson belongs on that list as well, for his films set in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. Licorice Pizza is his fourth original screenplay to be set in the Valley, after a trilogy of wildly different works between 1997 and 2002, namely Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and Punch Drunk Love. Their common setting isn't just any random city, but the place where Anderson was born in 1970 and where he grew up. And since each film was both set at a time when he lived in the Valley and made while he was still living there, he often handles his Valley characters with a sense of care and dignity, even the sillier or more arrogant ones who falter, spiral, and get caught up in ridiculous ploys that are destined to fail. He loves his characters, even when they find it hard to love themselves.
I don't like myself sometimes.
Each movie's plot has a different real-world influence. Boogie Nights is about the LA porn industry in the 70s and 80s. Magnolia draws from urban legends about coincidence. Punch Drunk Love is based on a real-life scheme to collect 1 million frequent flyer miles. But they also draw from real elements of Anderson's own upbringing. From his showbiz father, to his difficult relationship with his mother, to growing up in a household with 3 sisters. While none of this is strictly autobiographical, Anderson clearly uses parts of his childhood to inform his characters and their larger-than-life stories. Setting them in the San Fernando Valley makes them all the more personal, and his take on the valley is also reflected in the visual fabric he creates. The result each time feels completely unique to Anderson's sensibilities. But what do Anderson's films have to say about the valley and the people in it? The dizzying introduction to Boogie Nights is the first of many long, unbroken takes that paints the setting with frenetic energy. Based in part on adult film actor John Holmes and on Anderson's own student mockumentary, The Dirk Diggler Story, the film follows Mark Wahlberg's Eddie Adams, a 17-year-old from Torrance, California who rides the bus 30 miles to his dishwasher job in Reseda, a happening Valley neighborhood, in the hopes of breaking into show business. It's here that he meets porn director Jack Horner, played by Burt Reynolds, and takes on the name, before rising to stardom and eventually falling from grace. Part of Dirk's desire to be a star is motivated by wanting to get out from under his mother's roof. They have a contentious dynamic, echoing Anderson's relationship with his own mother, which the director referred to as troubled in an interview with the New York Times. At its core, Boogie Nights is about Dirk finding parent figures in people like Jack, a like-minded artist with creative ambitions, and in his co-star Amber, played by Julianne Moore, a character who tries to regain custody of her son and who acts as a maternal figure both to Dirk, despite their on-screen sexual relationship, and to high school dropout Roller Girl, played by Heather Graham.
I want you to be my mom, Amber.
Dirk and Jack are kindred spirits, as the only 2 characters in the film for whom porn seems to be an end goal. Almost every other character in the ensemble has goals that lie elsewhere, from opening a stereo store, to opening a nightclub, to becoming a magician. But no matter what these characters want, they find themselves constantly torn between dreams and disappointments. Along with cinematographer Robert Elswit, a fellow San Fernando native who worked on all 3 films, Anderson paints the valley as a place of people wrestling between light and darkness. But it's also a place of possibility, with excitement and opportunity always lurking just outside the frame. The film's dark interiors are usually contrasted with lens flares peeking through the corners of the screen and bright lights that draw your eye towards windows, doorways, and the outside world, as if the characters are constantly chasing greener grass or a brighter spotlight somewhere off in the distance.
I'm not stupid!
Dad?
Please don't be mean to me!
Dad? Dad, you need to be nicer to me.
Characters living adjacent to the promise of Hollywood and experiencing its darker side is a key part of Magnolia as well, another sprawling ensemble piece which unfolds over a single day in the valley and follows a web of characters connected by coincidence. The theme of fractured parent-child relationships is a central fixture once again, and this time, 3 showbiz dads take center stage. Quiz show host Jimmy Gator, played by Philip Baker Hall, the show's former producer Earl Partridge, played by Jason Robards, and Michael Bowen's overbearing Hollywood manager parent Rick Spector, who pressures his son Stanley into competing on the show. William H. Macy plays former quiz kid Donnie Smith, a former competitor on Jimmy's show and an adult mirror to the young prodigy Stanley, who finds it hard to express himself and to connect with other people. A man seemingly trapped by the lost glory of his childhood stardom, Donnie is often belittled and emasculated, not unlike Macy's character in Boogie Nights, Little Bill, whose wife cheats on him in public. Donnie is a warning of sorts for what might one day become of today's quiz kid Stanley. But Stanley is also not the only character who represents the possible fallout of growing up in or adjacent to the business. Jimmy's daughter Claudia, played by Melora Walters, has similar trouble connecting and expressing her emotions, a problem that takes especially unhealthy form for Earl's estranged son, played by Tom Cruise, a pickup artist type who turns his misogynistic rants into a cottage industry.
Respect the
However, what makes Magnolia deeply personal for Anderson is that he began to write it around the time that his father, the actor Ernie Anderson, died from cancer in 1997. Ernie already had something of a spiritual presence in Anderson's films. In Boogie Nights, the director paid fun homage to his father's on-screen work in the scene where Dirk and his friends try to con Alfred Molina's wild-eyed drug dealer while his associate lets off fireworks indoors. This is something Ernie would do as part of his Ghoulardi horror persona on various TV shows, a character Anderson even named his production company after. In Magnolia, the influence Anderson draws from his father becomes more overt and more melancholy, given Ernie's recent passing. When the film opens, producer Earl Partridge is already dying of cancer. We also later find out that Jack's mother died of cancer as well, which caused further problems between him and Earl. When game show host Jimmy Gator tries to patch things up with his daughter Claudia, it's right after his own cancer diagnosis.
I have cancer, and I'm dying very soon.
The film's unbroken long takes unfold in much more constricted environments than in Boogie Nights, with interior settings that feel like mazes closing in on the characters, like they're being suffocated by their showbiz surroundings. At over 3 hours in length, Magnolia also has the time to slow down and let characters' disappointments really set in, like during Earl's deathbed monologue, which lasts for 10 straight minutes, and plays over shots of the other characters in the film as if they're all bound by regret. Earl and Jimmy's impending deaths introduce a world of emotional complications for their families. The film's softer and warmer lighting, compared to the harsh flares of Boogie Nights, gives it a quieter and more reflective fabric, as characters are left to deal with their own demons and the demons of their parents before they're slowly consumed by conflicting feelings they may never be able to reconcile. Magnolia is a film steeped in grief and disappointment, and like its eventual climax, an enormous biblical storm which seems to come out of nowhere, it has no catharsis and no logical answers.
I really do have love to give. I just don't know where to put it.
I'm a nice man. I mind my own business. I have a love in my life. It makes me stronger than anything you can imagine.
For their next collaboration, Anderson and Elswit would return to some of the visual techniques they used on Boogie Nights, but for a vastly different purpose. Punch Drunk Love is about Barry Egan, a socially anxious plunger salesman played by Adam Sandler. One of the first things that stands out about the film is its appearance, and the way light always seems to overwhelm Barry, and the way he seems like he's drowning in the wide open loneliness of San Fernando. The lens flares from Boogie Nights reappear, but Anderson and Elswit overexpose the frame even further, making it uncomfortable to look at. This discomforting texture perfectly matches the story of Barry, who feels uneasy in his skin. This causes him to lash out whenever he feels emasculated by his 7 older sisters. Anderson, the third youngest of 9 children, grew up in a house with 3 of his sisters, so, like his previous films in the Valley, the story reflects some element of his personal experience. One of Barry's defining characteristics is his complicated relationship to women. He has no idea how to react when one of his sisters tries to set him up with her friend Lena, and he has a palpable discomfort around sexuality in general.
Are you stroking it yet, baby?
No, I'm not.
This complicated relationship to women and to sex is something that recurs throughout Anderson's Valley trilogy. Growing up in the Valley in the 70s and 80s, ads for sex work and images of the porn industry would have likely been inescapable to a young Anderson. And on some level, he seems to explore some of the ways that young men can internalize unhealthy attitudes towards women. Between Jack and Magnolia, whose irrational fears became the basis of his philosophy, and Little Bill in Boogie Nights, who responds to his wife's infidelity with deadly violence. Barry's outbursts also take on a violent tone, though his sisters don't seem to take him all that seriously. Thankfully, Barry isn't the kind of person who would physically harm any of the women in his life. In fact, he eventually finds someone with whom he can express some of his impulses in a safe and fun manner.
I want to chew your face and I want to scoop out your eyes and I want to eat them.
Meanwhile, his actual violence is reserved for the people who try to hurt the women he cares about. But despite these darker elements, Punch Drunk Love is a much more innocent film than its predecessors. For one thing, it's Anderson's first movie to feature a central romance, or anything resembling a happy ending. After several movies where the characters' lives don't pan out the way they planned, it's both refreshing and sweet to see one of Anderson's Angelinos in a good place once the credits have rolled.
So here we go.
While Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't set all his films in the Valley, he seems to return there for his most personal stories. After all, what better place to put the stories that have shaped you than a place that you love?